We measure the intelligence of ancient civilizations by what they didn't have. No computers, no electricity, no cranes, no steel. And because of that absence, we assume limitation. We assume struggle. We assume that anything they built must have been crude, approximate, heroic but flawed. But here's the problem with that logic. It confuses tools with result. And the results don't care what you believe. There are structures standing right now, scattered across the planet, that shouldn't exist according to our understanding of what's possible without modern machinery. Not because they're large, though many are. Not because they're old, though most are. But because when you examine them closely, when you measure them, when you try to reverse engineer the process that could have created them, you hit a wall. A clean, precise, mathematically impossible wall. This isn't about aliens. It's not about lost supercivilizations with flying cars and laser beams. It's about something far stranger. The possibility that we've been asking the wrong questions about our own species. That we've mistaken the absence of our technology for the absence of all technology. That intelligence, when given enough time and enough hands, can achieve things that look like magic to people in a hurry. What follows are 7 constructions that break the rules. Not all the rules, just the ones we thought were unbreakable. And the pattern that connects them isn't what you'd expect. The first impossibility: precision without machines. Deep beneath the desert sand at Saqqara, about 20 miles south of Cairo, there's a place most tourists never see. It's called the Serapeum, and inside it, buried in tunnels carved directly into bedrock, sit 24 granite boxes. Each one weighs around 70 tons. Each one is carved from a single block of stone. And each one is finished to a degree of precision that makes modern machinists go quiet. These aren't decorative objects. They're not sculptures. They're containers, designed, apparently, to hold something. But what arrests your attention isn't their purpose. It's their surfaces. When measured with laser instruments, the interiors of these boxes are flat to within 0.02 of an inch. The right angles are exact. The walls are parallel. The lids, which also weigh multiple tons, fit so tightly that you can't slip a sheet of paper between the stone and its seal. Now, here's the thing. Creating a flat surface isn't hard if you have small tolerances and don't care about perfection. But creating a truly flat surface, one that doesn't deviate across several feet of stone, requires feedback. You need to measure, adjust, measure again. You need abrasive compounds, calibrated tools, and patience that borders on madness. In modern workshops, this is done with diamond-tipped grinders, laser levels, and computer-controlled machinery. The ancient Egyptians, according to conventional chronology, had copper tools and stone hammers. That's not a small gap. That's a chasm. And the usual explanation, that they just worked harder, longer, with more people, doesn't actually solve the problem. Because this isn't about force. It's about control. You can't brute force your way to 0.02 of an inch. You can't will your way to perfect geometry. Either they had a method we don't understand, or they had tools we haven't found. Or both. The boxes sit there, silent and inexplicable, as if waiting for us to catch up. The second impossibility: scale that shouldn't move. In the Bekaa Valley of Lebanon, beneath the ruins of a Roman temple complex, lie 3 stones that redefine the word impossible. They're called the trilithon. Each block weighs somewhere between 800 and 1,200 tons. To put that in perspective, the largest stones used in the Great Pyramid weigh about 80 tons. These are 10 times heavier. And they're not sitting on the ground. They're lifted, positioned, and integrated into a foundation wall 20 feet above the bedrock. But even that isn't the strangest part. A short distance away, still in the quarry, lies another block. It's called the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, though no one knows why. It weighs roughly 1,650 tons. It was cut, shaped, and partially freed from the bedrock. And then, for reasons unknown, it was abandoned. Here's what makes this so psychologically uncomfortable. We have cranes today that can lift 1,000 tons. but they're massive, custom-built machines that require foundations, counterweights, and teams of engineers just to operate safely. The idea that ancient builders could move something that heavy, not with a crane, but with ropes, levers, and human labor, seems to violate physics. Not the laws, exactly, but the practical limits, the margin for error, because the problem isn't just lifting. It's controlling. If you're using rollers, ramps, or sledges to move a 1,200-ton stone, you're not just fighting gravity. You're fighting momentum. One mistake, one broken rope, one shifted support, and the whole thing becomes a landslide. A deadly, irreversible landslide. And yet someone decided this was a reasonable thing to attempt. Not once, but multiple times. Why? Not because they had better technology, but because they had a different relationship with risk, with time, and with the people doing the work. The question isn't how they moved the stones. It's why they chose to. When the question is wrong. Most documentaries about ancient engineering ask the same question over and over. How did they do it? And then they offer answers. Ramps, levers, wet sand, thousands of workers. Some of these answers are probably correct, but they all miss something deeper. They assume the goal was efficiency. That ancient builders, like modern contractors, were trying to minimize cost and maximize speed. But what if that wasn't the goal at all? What if the choice to use impossibly large stones, or to carve directly into mountains, or to build in the middle of a swamp wasn't a logistical challenge they had to overcome, but a deliberate decision that signaled something else entirely? Power, endurance, the ability to command not just resources, but generations. To say, we will do this thing that takes longer than a human lifetime, and we will finish it anyway. The impossibility was the point. The third impossibility, building by subtracting. In the Deccan Plateau of Western India, there's a temple that doesn't make sense. Not because of what it is, but because of how it was made. It's called Kailasa, and it's not built. It's carved. From the top down. Out of a single, massive cliff face. Imagine standing at the edge of a mountain and deciding not to quarry stone, not to stack blocks, but to remove everything that isn't a temple. To carve pillars, rooms, courtyards, statues, elephants, gods, all from one unbroken piece of rock. No assembly, no mortar, just subtraction. The temple is over 100 feet tall. It covers an area twice the size of the Parthenon. And every surface, every column, every relief was chiseled away by hand, working downward into the stone. If you made a single miscalculation, if you removed too much in one section, you couldn't undo it. You couldn't add stone back. The mistake would be permanent, visible, structural. Conservative estimates suggest that over 400,000 tons of rock were removed to create Kailasa. By hand. With chisels. Over the course of, well, no one really knows. Some scholars say decades. Others say a century. The inscriptions don't clarify. The architects left no blueprints. What they left is the temple itself. And the question it forces you to ask: if you're going to invest that much time, that much labor, that much risk into a single project, why choose the hardest possible method? Why carve downward, where every mistake is irreversible, instead of building upward, where you can always add another stone? Unless the difficulty was the offering. Unless the impossibility was the prayer. The fourth impossibility, when nature delivers the material. Not all ancient construction follows the same pattern. Some sites don't defy physics with weight or precision. They defy it with organization, with the ability to see what's already there and turn it into something new without moving it very far at all. Gunung Padang, on the island of Java, is one of those places. It's a terraced pyramid built into a hillside. But the stones that form its structure aren't quarried from miles away. They're columnar basalt, hexagonal pillars of volcanic rock that formed naturally when lava cooled and fractured in geometric patterns. The builders didn't create the shapes. They harvested them, chose them, arranged them like a massive, three-dimensional puzzle. Recent studies suggest the lower levels of Gunung Padang may be far older than anyone expected, possibly over 10,000 years old, though this remains contentious. What's not in dispute is the method. Whoever built it understood geology. They knew where to find the right kind of stone. They knew how to identify stable columns. And they knew how to stack them in ways that would lock together and hold for millennia. This is engineering of a different kind. Not brute force, not alien precision, but deep observation, the kind of knowledge you only get from living in a place for generations, from watching the land, from trial and error across centuries. The sophistication isn't in the tool. It's in the decision, the turn. The pattern begins to appear. By now, you might be noticing something. None of these sites rely on advanced machinery. None of them require materials we don't have access to. What they all require, is coordination, planning, the ability to mobilize human effort on a scale that we, in the modern world, reserve for wars and space programs. They didn't need better technology. They needed better systems. And they had them. The fifth impossibility, building with what shouldn't last. The Great Wall of China is famous for being long. Over 13,000 miles if you count all the branches and offshoot. But what's less famous is how much of it was built in places where there was no stone, no brick, no convenient quarries nearby. In the deserts of the Northwest, large sections of the wall are made from rammed earth, compacted layers of dirt, gravel, and twigs, pounded into frames and left to harden. This shouldn't work. Earth isn't permanent. It erodes. It cracks. It washes away in the rain. And yet portions of the wall built over 2,000 years ago are still standing, still intact, still doing the job they were designed for. How? The answer lies in the method. Rammed earth, when done correctly, becomes almost concrete-like. The layers compress into a dense, monolithic mass. The addition of organic material, rice husks, straw, even animal blood, creates a matrix that resists both water and collapse. It's not elegant, it's not high-tech, but it works. And it works because the people who built it understood their materials in ways that go beyond chemistry. They understood behavior, how earth settles, how moisture moves, how time and weather interact with structure. The wall doesn't stand because it's strong. It stands because it was built by people who knew exactly how weak it could afford to be. The sixth impossibility, the city that shouldn't exist. Beneath the town of Derinkuyu in central Turkey, there's a city. Not ruins on the surface. A city underground. 11 levels deep. Rooms for 20,000 people. Ventilation shaft. Wells. Storage areas. Chapels. Wine presses. Livestock pens. All carved directly into soft volcanic rock. This wasn't a mine. It wasn't a tomb. It was a living, functioning refuge designed to shelter entire populations during invasions. Massive stone doors, shaped like millstones, could be rolled into place from the inside, sealing off entire sections. Fresh air flowed through a network of shafts that reached the surface hundreds of feet above. And the whole thing was designed to be invisible from outside. The engineering challenges here aren't about weight or precision. They're about life support. About creating an environment where humans can survive, underground, for weeks or months at a time. In total darkness if necessary. Without suffocating. Without disease spreading uncontrollably. Without panic. Whoever built Derinkuyu didn't just think about how to dig. They thought about how to breathe, how to organize, how to live when the surface world became too dangerous to inhabit. And they did it so well that the city remained in use, on and off, for over 1,000 years. Pause. Who was the real enemy? If you step back and look at all these sites together, a pattern emerges. Not about technology, about threat. None of these constructions were built for comfort. They weren't built to impress tourists or showcase wealth. They were built to endure, to survive, to outlast whatever was coming. The enemy wasn't gravity. It wasn't the limitations of Bronze Age metallurgy. The enemy was time, war, collapse, the knowledge that empires fall, that invaders come, that cities burn, and that the only things that survive are the things too massive, too deep, too integrated into the earth to be erased. The impossibility wasn't the construction. It was the fear that made it necessary. The seventh impossibility: building where there is no ground. Off the coast of Pohnpei, a small island in Micronesia, there's a ruined city that sits on the water. It's called Nanmadol, and it's built on a coral reef. Not beside it, on it. 92 artificial islands, constructed from basalt columns stacked like logs, rising directly out of the ocean. The columns, like those at Gunung Padang, are natural formations, but they weren't found locally. They came from a quarry on the opposite side of the island, which means they had to be transported, over land, then over water, then placed with precision onto a reef platform in the middle of tidal currents. Each column weighs several tons. The largest stones in the complex weigh over 50 tons. And all of this was done by a population that, according to archaeological estimates, never exceeded a few thousand people. No wheels, no draft animals, no written records explaining how or why. The city was the political and religious center of the Saudeleur dynasty, which ruled the region for centuries. But after the dynasty fell, Nanmadol was abandoned. The jungle reclaimed the islands, the ocean ate at the foundations, and the whole thing became a ghost city, half submerged, slowly sinking back into the sea. What's impossible about Nanmadol isn't that it was built. It's that it was built there, in one of the most logistically hostile environments imaginable. And for what? For a dynasty that barely lasted. For a city that would be abandoned within a few generations. Unless, again, the impossibility was the point. Unless the message was, we can do this, even here, even with nothing but stone and will. The error of easy explanations. This is where the aliens come in, or the lost civilizations, or the giants, or the advanced prehistoric cultures with technologies we can't even imagine. And it's understandable why. Because when you stand in front of the Trilithon, or inside the Serapeum, or on the terraces of Kailasa, your brain wants an answer that matches the scale of the mystery. But here's the problem. Those answers don't explain anything. They just move the question. If aliens built the pyramids, who built the aliens' tools? If a lost super-civilization carved the boxes at Saqqara, where's the rest of their stuff? Where are the factories? The cities? The trash heaps? The real mystery isn't that these things exist. It's that we can't imagine our own ancestors doing it. That we've become so dependent on machines, on speed, on efficiency, that we've forgotten what humans are capable of when they have time, purpose, and no other option. The impossibility isn't in the stones. It's in us. The final pattern. Every site we've looked at shares certain trait. Not technological ones, human ones. Long-term planning. Projects that span generations. The willingness to start something you'll never see finished. Collective effort on a scale that subordinates individual life to communal legacy. And most importantly, a deep, intuitive understanding of the environment, of geology, of materials, of how the earth behaves when you pay attention for long enough. These weren't people with secret machines. They were people with systems, with knowledge passed down over centuries, with social structures capable of mobilizing labor not through coercion alone, but through shared belief. Through the idea that what they were building mattered more than their own comfort, their own lifespan, their own recognition. The technology is in the method, not the metal. Reframing the past. We've been getting it wrong. Not because we lack evidence, but because we lack patience. We assume that ancient people, because they didn't have engines, must have been constantly struggling, constantly improvising, barely succeeding. But the structures suggest otherwise. They suggest planning, mastery, confidence, the kind of confidence that only comes from doing something over and over until it becomes routine. Until lifting a 1,000-ton stone isn't a miracle, it's Tuesday. Our ancestors weren't less intelligent than us. They were less hurried. They thought in decades, not in quarters. They built for permanence, not profit. They created things that would outlast their children's children's children, knowing full well they'd never see the finished product. And that's the real impossibility. Not the engineering, the commitment, the question that remains. If these structures were discovered today, if archaeologists unearthed the Serapeum boxes tomorrow, with no historical context, no records, no prior knowledge, would we believe they were made by hand? Would we accept that ancient people, with access to nothing but stone tools and determination, could create something that precise, that massive, that enduring? Or would we invent explanations that let us off the hook, that preserve our sense of superiority, that keep the past safely primitive? Because the uncomfortable truth is this: we've stopped building things that last. We've traded permanence for convenience, monuments for quarterly earnings, and in doing so, we've lost something these ancient builders had: a relationship with deep time. The ability to start something that won't be finished in your lifetime and still care enough to do it right. These 7 constructions aren't mysteries because we can't explain them. They're mysteries because the explanation requires us to admit something we don't want to admit: that our technology hasn't made us smarter, just faster. And that speed is no substitute for vision. So here's the real question: which of these sites challenges your assumptions the most? Which one forces you to rethink what ancient people were capable of? Drop a comment. Let's talk about it. Because this conversation is just beginning. And if you want to go deeper, if you want to see what else we've been getting wrong about the past, stick around. There's more coming. Much more.